We're just um, trying to navigate this cultural thing. So anybody who is offended, please, egg me. I always say, please go and ask. Egg me. People are offended by words.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 4 of the Plus 1 to 3 4 podcast. I'm your co-host, Mustapha, and I'm here with.
Hello guys, my name is David.
Duniya.
Yeah, so we'll just jump right into it. So, from our previous video, we mentioned that episode 4 would be Africans versus African Americans, and that's the topic we have today. Very sensitive topic. We'll try to share as much knowledge as we have on the topic and, try to educate people about what exactly is the disconnect between both cultures from our perspective. So, let me just jump right into it. I think it goes back to the most obvious thing, which is slavery. So, slavery, to me, is what created a gap between all people of black descent, because of the outcome of slavery. So let me just go a little bit deeper into it from my perspective, because there was a day back in like 2018, I was so curious. I was like, this slavery thing, they keep saying Africans sold their kings to Europeans as slaves. And so I was talking to my uncle, then I was like, that doesn't make sense to me, because the African that I know, when I go to the village, there's a close community, there's a tight-knit community. Everybody knows everybody's family compound, because usually it's like a family compound, it's a family house per se, but we often refer to it as family compound. So, how is it possible that these people would sell each other? It didn't make sense to me. And so he was telling me about a story in the Benin Kingdom that there was a time that the Europeans landed in the British,
The British,
the British, not the Europeans, the British. This is specific to the British colonies. They landed in Benin, and they requested to see the king. And there was a ritual that the king was doing for like a couple of days that he's not allowed to see anybody. And then the emissary that was sent to come see the king was emphasizing and was still like forcing himself an audience with the king. And so as a result of that, he was beheaded for like disrespecting the culture of the Benin people. And when the British got a whim about it, they came and they leveled out the entire village. Genocide. And so there are often stories also that like sometimes parents will send their kids to the stream to get water, and then they never hear from them again. Like the kids just go missing. So a lot of these people were kidnapped. And the story over centuries and decades has been washed to be like people were sold. I personally do not believe that, because it's not something that is an African thing to do from my own experience growing up. And also we need to also take a note that back then the people who could write and read were the British. So whatever they wrote is what we believe today as history. And as we have seen with respect to Christianity, where for a very long time people believed Jesus to be white, we can see how they can dilute history, how they can misrepresent history. And I was watching CNN a couple of months back, and Don Lemon was going back and forth with this British woman, and she was like, the British actually stopped slavery, and we had to form a blockade in the waters to stop African kings from selling their own people to the British. I'm like, that makes no sense, because how do you want to take credit for stopping something you started? And I wanted to jump into the TV back then, because Don Lemon was lost for words. He could not articulate a response. I was like, you are making us look bad, because like she's lying through her teeth about what happened in history, and we are just giving them a pass. So, not to go too long into a monologue, but I believe that this is what has caused a divide between both communities, because history has been misrepresented, and you know, there's this kind of disdain in both communities. So I'll just let David jump right into it and tell us what you think about this topic.
I mean, yeah, definitely. That's definitely a factor. One more factor I would say is lack of education. I feel like a lot of African Americans do not know like much about Africa. They don't. Their perception of how Africa is from the media. So, for example, when I had someone ask me, literally ask me that, are there animals on the street in Africa?
Valid question.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Based on what they see on the media, valid
I
question.
was shocked that what kind of question is that? Of course not. But like, I mean, lack of education is like I would say one of the most important, one of the causes of the divide. Also, like you notice like when there is this war on Twitter, like oh, African Americans, oh blah blah blah. You notice that in the comments, they're usually attacking. They'll be like, oh, do they have phones? Like really? Do we have phones?
Yeah. Not to cut you off, I remember even when I started grad school, I had this friend of mine who was asking me, do you guys have shoes in Africa? I was like, huh? So what do you think? I walk down here? Like I just walk down from Africa to the US. Is that what you think?
Those are fighting words.
Yeah, those are like very, very ignorant things. And often, or personally, I blame the media for this, but we'll still go deeper into that. Duniya, give us your thoughts.
Well, I mean, Africans, depends on what we want to call a specific type of people. So I think I just want to understand, like, make people understand what we are talking about here. So people who are blacks, like, who came from Africa, and people who are descendants of, the black race in America.
Yeah.
We all share one thing in common. We are all Africans at the end of the day.
Exactly.
So my experience personally is that we have similarities and differences that we always try to fall in between in terms of all aspects of our life, how we view it. Like African Americans, they feel entitled. They're Americans, they were born here. They feel they're supposed to be treated in some kind of way, and they see maybe Africans who come from Africa as different from them. So I think over time, the education available, as David said, makes you define a person and makes you see their culture as it is based on what you read, based on the stories you hear. So I think what we are here to talk about is maybe one-on-one experience.
Yeah.
In terms of racism, discrimination, in terms of even thoughts of both Africans and African Americans. And some will shock you, some will be revealing to you, some are educative, some are downgrading. So I think living life here, there's systematic experience, there are personal experience. So it depends. I think personally we've all had personal experience with African Americans, and so far so good. I'll say I've had pretty much good experience. So we all have that difference and similarities. That's what I'll say for the both camps.
Yeah, I mean, I also work with like African Americans at work. Even when I started my career in the US, and some of them are some of the nicest people I've met in the US. So often when I see this thing online, I don't understand where it's coming from. But there's something I've also noticed with pop culture as well. Let me just jump right into comedy, for example. Like you see the comedy greats like Dave Chappelle, Chris Rock, and some of these famous comedians. They stand on stage, they tell all these tales about Africa, and they'll be like, "Oh, I went to Africa. There's a tracker. He pick up the shit from the giraffe. He smells it, and he can track the giraffe." And I'm like, he says that on a public stage as a comedian.
People believe that.
And then, no, to a predominantly white audience, and they all laugh. And if you notice something that there's something I've noticed in pop culture, that if you see the white comedians, they're always proud of their European origin. If you see some of them that are from Germany, they'll talk about Germany. No, Germany is a bad example. But Switzerland, they talk about the Swiss. They are so proud of their origin. Talk about France. They'll be like, "Oh, my grandfather came or immigrated from France." This, that. They have beautiful stories
Irish.
that they are telling. Or Irish too. But the black comedians, they always tell all these jokes denigrating Africans, and they let white audience laugh, not knowing that if you yourself don't respect where your ancestors originate from, other people are not going to respect it. Like, you cannot make jokes, like disparaging jokes about like Africa continuously and expect other people from other races to respect you as a black person, because every black person is from Africa.
But you know one thing with comedy is that these guys like to go beyond even boundaries to make
I understand.
to make jokes out of anything.
I understand. Jokes are not supposed to be censored, but these are some of the things that that plant stereotypes in the society. Like, for example, like if they make jokes about like Asians, they keep making that particular type of joke about Asians, or they make jokes about Latinos getting pregnant quick. People start to believe the stereotype. No, that is true. Like, you create a stereotype if you continuously keep saying something or reiterating something to people.
Who is to blame?
This is pop culture in general. I'm just speaking comedy.
Okay.
As a
genre.
Yeah, as a genre of pop culture, this is comedy. So, and also, comedy aside, you go into the media. Like, every time, there's always, on CNN in particular, because CNN gets on my nerves a lot, you always see them, they're helping poor children in Africa. They look for the worst type of pictures to put on CNN to show like, oh, all these people are suffering in Africa. Oh, $1 from this a donation or $1 into this charity is going to help drinking water or help provide drinking water in Africa.
Meanwhile, in Flint, Michigan, literally, they have no water. It's crazy.
Yeah, their water is like poison. So it's like
crazy.
And also, there have been numerous reports from independent investigators in the UN that shows that a lot of UN soldiers end up breaking the people that the African kids that are under their protection, or some of the money that they send to Africa is being diverted to other things. Because even me, I've asked myself this question. Okay, every year they say they are helping Africa, they're bringing food, they're bringing this, but why are people still hungry there? It doesn't make sense. What is causing this incessant hunger in this place that they keep sending money and goods to? So I think there's a gap there, and this is what creates stereotype about like Africa being like a place where there's no footwear, we are suffering, there's no water, there's no food.
Okay. What about you as an African here in the diaspora? Like, what has been your experience with African Americans that make, okay, you just mentioned there's a gap in what they portray to them, right?
So my own experience is like generally,
but I think African Americans, right, or the culture here, I feel they are really being controlled in terms of what they should know, even about their own past.
Yeah, that's valid.
So that extends to even what they think about, for those who are not that exposed, that will extend to what they think about Africa. You know, if they don't do their research or even travel down there to see themselves. Some of them that are even celebrities, right? Yeah. Black celebrities, you see them travel to Ghana and some places and they'll be like, wow, I didn't know the culture was like this welcoming.
Yeah, but I also want to finish my point about the comedies. Like, if you treat your origin as a joke, every other race is going to treat you as a joke. That's the point that I want to make. Like, I'm not trying to censor comedy or try to censor what comedians can joke about, no. But if you repeatedly keep making jokes about where you're from, your ancestors, at the expense of laughs from a predominantly white audience, then everybody's also going to see you as a joke. You cannot expect them to respect you. That's one. Also, let me jump into my relationship or my experience with African Americans. When I got here, usually there's a stigma in Africa that African Americans are lazy. They have so much opportunity, they don't make use of the opportunity, they are just lazy, they are always complaining. That is the general perception that we get from Africa. And then there was a time I went to Miami with a couple of friends of mine. And we're in Miami, we're having a conversation about this topic in particular. And he told me about like systematic disenfranchisement. Like, for example, like if you go to like predominantly black communities, you see Planned Parenthood and McDonald's. Things to keep you unhealthy and things to kill you and to kill your unborn offspring. And then if that hood gets gentrified for a white settlement in the future, you see they'll take out all the Planned Parenthood and the McDonald's and all that stuff, and they just make everywhere beautified. And it started to make sense to me. Like, if there are systems put in place to keep you down, there's no way you're going to succeed. Like, a lot of us that come from Africa, we come like with our first degree. Usually we come in with to come do our masters. We already have a foundation in terms of education that our parents have paid for. And then when you come here, you see all this disenfranchisement, and you see that some of them cannot get the education, even if they want to get it. Like, they might not give them the student loans because of how they live with their parents or their upbringing. They are always put in survival mode. And even when it comes to chasing their education, it's not something that they see as a way out. They always see like football or rap or sports in general as a way out of the hood. And so you see all these things, and then it begins to make sense. Like, these people are not lazy. Jim Crow never ended. They just found new ways to rename it. It's just disenfranchisement. And some Africans don't know this. They just think, like, based on what they see in the media, in movies, or in pop culture, they think, oh, that's how those people are. But it requires a deeper understanding of the subject matter to be able to be like, oh, I understand why these people are like this, why they feel the way they feel, or why they always have to be in defense mode, because the system or the society always has one foot on their necks. And that explains a lot of the anger that comes from the black community in the US. And I think it's worth mentioning and it's worth acknowledging as Africans. And also validate their pains when they are expressing those pains. So that's all I have to say about my experience with African Americans and how my thought process has evolved over the years.
Well, what about talking about like opportunities to collaborate? Because I don't know much African American collaboration in terms of promoting the culture. For example, I've been to the African Black History Museum, I think, in Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a museum that is kind of dedicated to the African American race in America, their founding fathers and all that. But does it actually help in connecting the African Americans in America back with Africa? And are Africans, like we back home, are we in tune with accepting African Americans?
Yeah, so
Are we like, I mean, I look at it and I'm like, there's no much really happening, you know? There's no much really happening in terms of conversations to bring this group of people together to understand that they all have a history, they coexist, they have probably share the same opportunities, the same problems. You know, we all kind of share mostly the same problems here.
Yeah.
I mean, like, there are some African Americans that don't want to be associated with Africans, like.
Yeah, that's true. That's worth acknowledging.
So, I don't. They don't. Not everyone has to like Africa. Like, I don't know. Like, if you feel like, oh, you are not connected to Africa, you don't want to be, even though you are a black person, then that's fine. That's your business. But like, don't just talk down on Africa and Africans. You can be on your own and say, oh, I don't want to have anything to do with Africa, but just don't talk down on Africans, because I see it on Twitter a lot, like on Twitter.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's based on maybe in the context of youth, let's say relationship, you know, I think like episode 1 we mentioned something about Nigerian guys always being victims of they will break your heart, that kind of stereotype. So maybe in that context of relationship,
I mean,
okay, and we have difference in culture, so maybe expectations, like they always have expectations for you to behave in a certain way.
Yeah.
And when they see you behaving in a certain way, they get pushed off and be like, I don't want to be as
Okay. Yeah. So a part of this episode is that while we shed some light on the differences and the gaps that we have between both communities, we also have to be critical of both communities. So my own critique of the African American community is that they only want to be associated with Africa when it's cool. For example, I remember when Black Panther came out.
Wakanda forever.
The first Black Panther came out, like everybody was putting on the dashiki. They were doing the Wakanda forever, and they were all over the whole thing. Like, this is Black Panther. This is our African heritage. But at the same time, when you go back to your home after watching the movie, you look down on Africans, you talk down on Africans, and even the movie itself, I remember I had lots of critique about it on Twitter that, okay, this is a movie about Africa, a superhero from Africa. They should have an African star there, an African star that was born in Africa, that was raised in Africa, that started their acting career in Africa, and let him be one of the main cast, not people who are mimicking African accents and doing a terrible job at it. Like, for example, wait, let me finish this. For example, if they cast Americans for a British role, they will go above and beyond to make sure they perfect their British accent. Yep. If they cast British for American roles, they will go far and beyond, far and wide, to make sure they sound as American as possible. But with the Black Panther movie, I felt like the accents were just lazy. They did not put a lot of effort into it.
To be fair,
Wakanda
is fictional, so
it's fictional. But okay, if you have how many? Wait, for example,
go to Rotten Tomatoes.
Wait first, because I'm very passionate about this thing, and I really want my stance to be very known about it. Like, for example, if you go to like their superhero movies, like the Red Skull is a fictional character, but it sounds German, and any actor playing the Red Skull, even though he's fictional, has a good German accent, speaks German. So I don't think it's a valid excuse to say because the country of Wakanda is a fictional place, they shouldn't put enough effort in perfecting their African accent. I just think it's a cop-out for me, and I don't think you should only associate yourself with like Africa when it's high. For example, with Afro beats. Oh, you like Afro beats. Oh, you like the Black Panther movie Wakanda Forever. That is wrong. You need to associate with Africa at every point, not only when it's cool. But that's what I want to say about that.
The easiest way to look at it is, let's say most of them are trying to appreciate the diversity. Most of them are trying to be involved in the movement, even though they do not have the qualities to portray those characters.
Okay, it's fine, but it's still worthy of critique.
Yeah,
I think we should be honest. Where we need to have criticism, we should criticize.
Yeah.
And where we need to show understanding, we should understand. But that is something that I'm passionate about. Yeah. Like, whatever Black Panther movie they are releasing next, they should have an African as a main cast, either as a villain or as the protagonist. That is very important because like the only other African movie that we have had is The Lion King, and they are all animals in there. So in Disney. So
Well,
no,
true.
if you
Okay.
check Disney, how many other African animations or cartoons do they have?
I have a question first of all. So we are all Africans, right?
Yeah.
If we do end up having kids in America, they will end up being African Americans.
Actually, no.
First
There was a
generation.
video. There was a video I saw about Chima Amanda. She was saying something about like this difference between African Americans and American Africans. There's actually a difference.
Okay.
So African Americans are like descendants of slaves. That's exactly what it is. And then the American Africans are those that are children of African immigrants.
Okay.
So I don't know who is making that distinction and why they need to make that distinction, but I thought it was interesting.
That's very interesting.
That's a
Yeah.
very interesting topic. And to be distinct mentally is different from to be distinct on paper.
Yeah.
Because if you fill in a form now, they'll just ask you black or
White, Hispanic.
Or African American,
African
right?
American. Yeah? So if you identify as maybe just only African, or you identify as the American African, or what did you?
Yeah, it's American
say?
African, they call it.
It-
I don't know why it is that distinction, but that is also something we'll talk about later.
It has to be unique. So why I ask that question is because this, right? I have come across people who are like African Americans, but they've evolved to accept the culture, to be appreciative of the culture, and to even make effort by like traveling. You can imagine you being black and you've not traveled out of America before.
Or do you even have any passports?
You understand? Imagine how it would be for you. Like you've
Yeah.
not been to any Negro country, Negro nation. You've not even been.
Let's just say black.
Yeah,
Negro
black.
sounds a little bit too hard.
Yeah,
Negro means black now.
Eh?
Negro means black.
But in terms of context,
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't mean to be offensive. We're just trying to navigate this cultural thing. So anybody who is offended, please, egg me. I always say, please go and ask. Egg me. People are offended by words. So
oh my god, that's funny. That is funny.
So you discover that, right? Depending on how you grow, how you get educated, your color of your skin is your color of your skin, right? And
Yep.
then the orientation you grow up to have, because you can raise someone to make him believe he's not any black American, nothing. He's just American. Now that's pure patriotic Americans where they're not looking at their skin. But obviously, when they do get into society, when they start having jobs, let's say a child grows up and he starts going to college and all that, depending on where they grow, they either identify them as something and then they see themselves as something. You know, if first generation Africa now, you always you travel to Africa with them, they will feel like, oh, they're from somewhere. So people maybe in the school environment can make them feel a certain way about themselves, like make them feel, oh, you're a descendant of a slave or you're a nigger or whatever it is, like words like that trigger people to feel a certain way about themselves,
Yeah.
to remind them of their color. So there's that bonding that has to kind of like occur between the African people and the African people abroad. Even though you came from a slave or you came from Atlantis, like I feel there should be that collaboration towards the future that distinctively, yeah, you can know how you descended from, into be who you are. But if you want to look forward, you don't have to be different.
Yeah.
You know,
So,
you don't have to
so
be different.
that is the critique that I have for Africa, because I've given my critique to the African American community. The critique I have for Africa is that I think we should be more open. Like if the African Americans that take like most of these DNA tests and they have like 50% Ivorian, they should be able to get Ivorian citizenship. Just to reiterate the topic is Africans versus African Americans. We're talking about similarities, differences, some of the gaps that we have in both communities. And like I was saying earlier, the critique that I have for Africa, because I've given my critique for the African American community, the critique that I have for Africa is that usually now there's access to DNA tests. So if like an African American takes the DNA test and they're like 50% Ivorian or 50% Ghanaian or 40% Nigerian, they should be entitled to be able to get citizenship in those countries. Because like if they want a breath of fresh air from America, for example, like they can have another place they can call home. For like descendants of like the Danish people now, for example, they know their parents are from Denmark or Finland or somewhere. They can always have that connection to home and be like, you know what, let me go visit where my parents are from or where my grandfather is from. And they can have that closure. So I think as Africans, we should be able to be more welcoming to the African Americans, especially those ones that are interested in reaching out. Yeah. There are some that are not interested, and that's fine. They're entitled to their opinion. They're entitled to do it, to feel how they feel.
Are Africans even welcome to other Africans?
That's it.
Yes, that is something that came as a result of colonization and slavery. So people tend to forget that even we can acknowledge the fact that there was slavery, there was also colonization in Africa, and Africa itself wasn't free till the 60s, which was the same time that they were getting civil rights in the United States.
Yeah.
So there's a kind of like convergence there in both communities where we started getting more and more freedom in the 60s, both in Africa and in America here for the African Americans. And so that is something worth mentioning for those people that do not know, thinking that, oh, Africa was just folding their arms all this while where their brothers and sisters or allegedly were slaves. Africa wasn't free.
I want to ask you a question. It just popped to my head. Two things just came to me while you were talking. So one is healing and hurting. Then second is borders. So my first question is this, or my first observation. Africans are hurting in the sense that we always have differences. For example, where we come from, we're always hurting on our differences.
Yeah, tribes,
Yeah.
and all that, and what's it, religion, whatever it is, though. And we're always trying to heal. After, for example, now we have an election, we are done, and then we want to now heal and start thinking as if we are one, we are Nigerians, right? So I don't know. I think it's the same too for African Americans. There's always a hurting season, and there's always a healing. Then that's one. Secondly, the borders, right? I was watching a clip online, and I think one African president said, why are we so particular about these borders that the Europeans can
Drew, I know. It's crazy.
Yeah, that is another thing that I wanted to chip in, is that the only people that win if there's a breach and there's a conflict between Africans and African Americans are people who are not black. Those are the people that will benefit from it, because we'll become a source of their entertainment and will become a source of their talking points to put on the news and disparage us. Those are the people that gain from the conflict that happens between Africans and African Americans. And I think being black, we have already been through so much, regardless of our journey, that we do not need to disparage ourselves and make it easy for others to do the same as well. Like, for example, if the police stops me while I'm driving, they're not going to ask me, what kind of black are you? Are you African American or are you African black? They see me as black. So my experiences a lot of the time when it comes to racism in the US is almost identical to African Americans. So we have a shared journey in that, and I think it's very important that we see that, and that we don't always try to outdo each other or outwit each other. I think that's dumb to me. I think there's no end goal for that. But if we are working as one, then we can
Are we always trying to compare our hurting?
Yeah,
that's the
there's
way
like
these
Dave
people
Chappelle
say,
say, there's no
yeah.
comparative suffering. Everybody, if you suffer, I suffer. We don't need to start comparing the suffering.
Suffering Olympics.
Exactly.
I know, right?
The only thing that doesn't discriminate is suffering. Everybody suffers. Everybody suffer in one way or
But
another.
in the larger frame too, why are human beings in a constant why are we so differential? Not just African American, you can even look at even the white race, the Asian race, like, every culture you always see a history where, like, for example, you see Japan and all those Asian countries. If you see them, you won't see like much difference just looking at them. Some will tell you we are different. If you identify maybe a Chinese person to be Japanese, sometimes they might even get offended.
They get offended,
yeah. This is a little bit off topic, but to what you are saying, the reason why the Chinese and the Japanese always get
to kind of make us understand that why we have this existing stuff is not just between us. It's like more of a general,
I understand what you're saying, but to touch on what you were saying, like the Japan invaded China, I think at some point during like the 40s or the 50s, and there was a lot of genocide, which is why there's bad blood between both countries. So, for example, if you mistake a Chinese for a Japanese, they'll get offended because there's bad history there. So that is just something I wanted to put out there, something that happened.
So there's a hurting and
there's exactly. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I know about like the history of Japan and China. Also, I also want to note this, that if you even check the Grammys, like back to pop culture, if you check the Grammys, like you can see somebody like Adele, Ed Sheeran, they'll win a category in a Grammy, and they are not Americans. But for some reason, when it comes to Afrobeats and African music, they'll group us all together with world music. I think the Grammy should, the same way they have a hip-hop category where they acknowledge hip-hop artists, we should also have a category for Afrobeats.
I don't want, please, no.
We should also have a category for Afrobeats.
I disagree.
And also, if an African releases a rap album that is good, they should also be nominated under the hip-hop category.
Why though?
I disagree because, one, if you look at the history of the Grammys, for example, let's say they nominated Wizkid, Davido, Burna Boy for Best Afrobeats Album.
But do you know who is the Grammy person?
Oh, let me finish. Then, for Grammys, they can add one white person to that list that is non-African to be in that category, and the person might win that category. So if whites start winning Afrobeat category, it's going to be an issue, and I'm sure it's something the Grammys can do. So for me, I would say they should keep their award in their category.
Eminem is white and his one rap album. I don't think it is hip hop suffered as a result of Eminem winning a hip hop album of the year.
Afrobeat is for us, please. Like the Grammys should stay. I'm okay with.
Being a ball hog right now.
It's not about being a ball hog
because I think Afrobeat, if it's a very good genre that has a future, we should leave it open to every community. For example, like Afrobeats today, there's a fusion of Amapiano. Amapiano is South African, but Nigerians have started borrowing some Amapiano sounds from South Africa, and they are infusing it as part of Afrobeats. So, if it's a genre and you leave it open to creatives, the genre is going to keep growing. Like hip hop when it first started, I think sometime in the 60s or so. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. It didn't sound as sophisticated as it sounds now. Now they have melodic rap, which was not even existent back then. During the time of the Will Smiths and Ice Cube, that was not the kind of melody. That was not the kind of rap they were doing there, melodic rap. But now rap has evolved as a genre. So I think Afrobeat to keep evolving, And also, even though there's bad blood in South Africa between the whites and the blacks in that country, there are also white Africans. Morocco has people who are of lighter skin. Algeria, Tunisia, they are Africans. So even Egypt. So if an Egyptian wants to make Afrobeat, are we going to say no because you're not black? It's
They're African. They're African.
It's African. So yeah, I think we should.
But I don't want the Grammys to decide what is Afrobeat and what is not Afrobeat. That's my point.
I think the history of the Grammy. I was asking if you know who the Grammy was, the person who was the Grammy. No, sorry, it's not the Grammy. It's the Oscars.
Okay.
Sorry, that was
okay.
The Oscar was actually a black person who was a producer and a writer in Hollywood.
Oh,
He was actually a person, the Oscar, I don't know his name in particular, but I know his name has Oscar in it. And I think from the history, the first content he created, he couldn't get anybody to direct, or they were giving him too much of a hassle. So he had to write, produce, direct everything on his own.
that's interesting.
So
I would like to learn more about that.
Interesting history about the Oscar.
Nice.
Anyway,
Nice.
well, I think if we have the opportunity, someday we will have conversations with people who are African Americans.
Yeah, so
and
to kind of like open it up and have like
that will be very more open
Yeah.
conversations, because we might just be projecting our thoughts about what they feel, how they feel, what they think. At the end of the day, it's actually good to have one-on-one conversations with people, because everything we talk here is based on true life experience, true life events. So,
Quick question. I might be going off topic a bit, but I don't know if you guys know the story of colonization. So I don't know where I got this from, but there was this story I heard that when the colonizers came to Africa, they brought mirrors to Africa, and we sold our people for mirrors.
yeah, that's a crazy story. Like
yeah, mirror, schnapps, alcohol.
matches, matchbox. People sold people for matchboxes. Like that makes no sense.
Do you know that? I feel where you heard that is from school.
Yeah, exactly. School
It's not anywhere.
School that is supposed to inform us and
It
educate
was
us.
the history we had in our primary school. I remember.
Yeah.
Wow.
They quickly kind of browse the slave
Yeah.
topic.
Yeah.
And they tell you things. The trade was valid. Is a trade. They tell you what a trade is.
That is an absolute lie.
I tell you.
That's
So they
a
tell
lie.
you what a trade is.
I don't believe that.
So in that regard, to be honest, it's never a sweet story. It's always a bitter story. Talk about colonization is
And
always
if you
a bitter
notice,
story.
when they teach us about colonization and slavery, it's always when we are like kids, when our brains are still easy to be brainwashed.
Yep.
When we are still easy to
Now,
be, like for
see,
example, that is when they teach you religion
Think about
too.
it. What
Yeah, when
Like,
you're young.
When you are very young, when it's so
You can't
easy,
think
like
properly. You can just collect information.
For example, now that you're older, if you start to analyze some things that you heard when you were a kid, you'll be like, well, that didn't really make sense, did it? And you start to question more and more things. So, like, I've been so curious about this colonization and slavery, and I don't believe the
growing
history.
up, right?
I do not
Growing
believe
up,
that.
right? Growing up, right? They program you to feel like the war started in 1960.
Yeah.
Like literally, that's the independence of your country. So, I don't know if that's how it is in other African countries where they kind of like put so much importance on independence from colonies, and they don't really tell you. They just give you a bunch of stories, the acclamation, this, that,
Amalgamation.
and it always sounds like it was natural for somebody to be in your land. Like they are not they don't naturally live there, but they were in control of things. They were sharing, governing this state, that state, but they are not from there, and they don't tell you why they were there, whether they were suppressing. They just want to make you feel like it's natural.
Yeah.
And you can't ask questions about
They
it.
start our history teachings from 1960, like that's when the world started. Like we should be thankful we had independence in the 60s. No, we should not. The British were not supposed to be in Africa in the first place. They were not supposed to be there. And these same people have the audacity to complain about immigration today, like after invading so many countries. Let's not be playing semantics right here. I'm very, very straightforward about this. Like, they shouldn't be collecting colonial tax from African countries, and they should return our artifacts that are in their museum.
That's the one that makes me mad. Like, why will you come to
Return
Africa?
whatever is in your museum that does not belong to you that you stole. Return it.
Like,
it's not yours.
I was watching I think it was John Oliver, the comedian. I was watching. He did what's it called? A story on British people, like how they stole like artworks from Africa, and he talked about like the Benin Kingdom. Like, there's a bunch of Benin artworks in I think it's the British Museum. I don't know, just laying there, and it's crazy because they've asked for their artifacts back, but they don't want to give them. They're like, oh, we can keep it better for them. Like, it's not for you. Like, give it away. Like, why are you keeping it?
Like, it's the audacity for me to even put it on display. Imagine somebody comes to your house and steals something and go put it on display somewhere.
Right, like those things are like, they have spiritual connections to the people that own them. It's not just artwork, like it's more than artworks.
Yo, guys, a thought came to me. Now you talk about stolen. I might sound wild, right? But you know these stories that Nollywood used to tell us about. You go to a shrine, you meet somebody, they call that person's name, and the person comes up in a mirror. Or you can do something to know where somebody is.
Yeah.
Like hunters, they'll know where there's a particular animal before they go to hunt.
Yeah.
So yesterday, somebody sent me a post about air tags, that somebody lost their Apple headphones, right?
Yeah.
And then they were able to find it.
Wow.
In the airport worker's house.
Wow.
So the thing just bounced on me. I was driving and I was like, yo, 200 years ago, can you track something that is missing? Like, can something be missing and it will go thousands of miles away from you, and then you can track the exact location? So in my head, I was like, yo, it seems there's a lot of stolen knowledge and technology that
that's
colonies people.
A lot of those
especially
dolls.
For example, they said in Benin they were like rare metals, where before the white people came, they found rare metals where it's not like you need mining skills to get to those metals.
Yeah.
Even as Africans, right? If you go,
and there's not enough credit given to Africans in terms of building up knowledges about.
You know the crazy thing, what they do.
Wait. Even as Africans, right? Stuff. Let me just say this. Even as Africans, we don't have knowledge of our history past your great grandfather.
Yeah.
No. You don't. But if you check most of the Europeans now, they can trace their family tree up down to. So this is the result of colonization and the British being in our country when they were not supposed to be in our country. A lot of history is lost. A lot of the artifacts that they stole, we used to write history on those artifacts. Like you can trace a person's family from an artwork. It's just, you can imagine like a country like Russia now goes and takes over the Colosseum in Italy and says it's theirs and put it on display in a museum somewhere in Russia. Wouldn't that be outlandish? So that is the importance of those artifacts, and a lot of the knowledge about how to transcribe and read those artifacts is already lost because there's nobody to learn and there's nobody to pass that knowledge forward. So imagine an artifact somewhere in Britain has history of your family tree from like 4 or 5 generations ago, and now is in a British museum for British entertainment for them to display to the world. Is that not outrageous? That is outrageous. Return our artifacts. Return it.
Good luck with that.
No, honestly, it's going to get to a point that the more we keep talking about it, they will have no other choice but to return it.
They don't care about anything.
You are giving these people too much credit. You are giving them too much credit. Like, how many are they? Britain is like a mountain. It's like the size of like an island somewhere. Like, they make themselves seem bigger than they are. They are not as big as they are. Like, if we all band together and force them to return things that were stolen, they will have no choice but to return them. They would have no choice. It's not yours. It doesn't belong to you, and you are not helping us safeguard it. It's not your job to safeguard it for us. It belongs to us.
Those are, I think, part of the challenges that we face when we talk about bringing the colony together. There are a lot of potholes when it comes to the history. I remember when one of the artists challenged the thought of being slaves for like over 400 years.
Oh, Kanye, right?
And there was an outrage because you know how the public is so emotional about certain issues. It's like we're never ready to talk about it. It's like nobody's ready to question some certain things. We just want to probably just let it be and just continue the healing. But as I said, when you bring up some issues, some people will start hurting. But then at the end of the day, we have to heal.
Yeah.
So
I'm very passionate about Africa and about Africa taking its rightful place in the world, because like we check science, mathematics, and all of these things that make the world what it is today originated from Africa. Everybody originated from Africa. So Africa holds a special place in this world, and a lot of times people keep knocking it down. And I also want to put this out to the African American community that you are also African. You are also African.
I know we are not South Africans, but do you guys know the history of South Africa?
Apartheid and all that stuff, right? Yeah.
What do you feel? And one thing again I noticed, maybe statistics will prove me wrong. In all African countries, I noticed South Africans are not, especially in the United States. Maybe they are, but I hardly encounter them.
Do you know I've said that to someone before? Was it you I told, like, I don't see South Africans, like, I've not seen them in America before. Like,
Trevor Noah is South African.
Apart from Trevor,
we're saying in statistics, in numbers,
yeah,
they are not as much populated. But also, what I want to bring about is their history. Just to talk about us is like British. I think them, they were like Dutch.
Yeah, the Dutch.
And the fight for their land, and it's been going on for so long. I've never been to SA before, but they have a pretty unique history in terms of how the race of the black and white have related. It's so much. Nelson Mandela from there.
Apparently, they don't like him that much. A lot of South Africans that are black don't like Nelson Mandela, but that's a topic for another day.
Exactly. We're not South Africans. We don't really know.
So,
but that's how huge Africa. I imagine if Africa was one, like the United States.
And those of you that don't even bother to like educate yourself about the fact that Africa is like about 54 countries in the continent, and anytime you refer to Africa, you refer to it as like just one place. I think at this day and age, you don't have any excuse to not be informed about the fact that Africa is a bunch of countries.
That's part of the education that people don't have.
You don't. There's no excuse for that. Like it's a Google search away. Just search how many countries in Africa is going to tell you.
I know, right?
Like you can't just every time stay in public spaces and refer to Africa as like a country.
I think
that is too dumb.
I was watching a video.
In this day and age, if you don't know that,
yeah,
you need a lashing, a spanking or something. Even as an adult, like it's basic knowledge. Africa is not one country; it's a combination of 54.
I was watching a video, I think on Twitter, and they were interviewing some people, and they asked them, name 5 African countries.
Yeah, they could not.
They couldn't.
It's ridiculous.
I'm like, wow. And
So-
we are supposed to be the ones that are uneducated. Meanwhile, you guys don't know anything.
That's
It's
crazy.
crazy.
This is not the end of this topic. We'll definitely have numerous iterations of this topic, and we're going to wrap today's episode here because we've been here for a while, and we'll continue this conversation in another chapter. So As always, please like, subscribe, leave a comment. If you know a little bit about some of the history we're talking about, leave it in a comment so people reading can be educated. Like, leave links where people can find like information about things that we are discussing today. And so, tell us things you don't agree with. Like, let's open the floor for conversation and discussions. And let's continue to educate ourselves about our history and bridge whatever gap is between both communities. That is the African and the African American community. Everything I've said today is because I love African, I love African Americans, and I think it's high time to start working together to form a base, to form our own structure. So, on that note, we'll wrap today's episode. Do any of my co-hosts have anything to add to what I just said?
We're all set.
Yeah, all set. Just
So-
like, subscribe, and please subscribe. That's very important for us,
It's
please.
very important for the algorithm. You can also click on the bell if you want to be notified whenever we drop a new video. And let's keep the engagements going. Let's grow this channel together and let's educate ourselves. Let's uplift each other as Africans and African Americans. And I'll see you on the next episode.
Peace out.
Peace.
Peace.